Okay, so last week, CNN hosted a climate crisis town hall, they called it, with 10 Democratic um, presidential candidates. Uh, I am based in the United States, so I have not formally said that yet on this channel. So this was very long. It was 7 hours total. I did not watch every second of it. I do have clips here of 8 of the 10 candidates because the issue of animal agriculture came up a lot, which I was happy about. Most of the responses I was not very thrilled with. We're going to get into that. I don't have anything from Joe Biden or Julian Castro. However, it's worth noting, at least on the animal welfare front, Julian Castro has a very detailed um, animal welfare plan on his website. I'm not going to read through this whole thing now. I will link the description for those interested. A couple of key things that I really like in here is he plans to ban animal testing on cosmetics. He'll also end kill shelters, make animal cruelty a federal crime, which you could argue that what goes on in factory farms definitely, but really any farming of animals. I mean, it depends on how you define cruelty, really. Um, I would consider taking the life of an animal that does not want to die uh, under any circumstance would count as cruel. We would definitely consider that cruelty against humans. But nonetheless, that's still a good thing. Can't nitpick too much. We gotta go baby steps. And also, this is a big one. He wants to end what are known as ag-gag laws. So these help to provide cover for these farms and all the horrible things that they do. And so I think if more of this gets out to the public, people will really start to see, hey, this is messed up. Maybe I don't want to take part of this. And so if we remove the ag-gag laws, that could be a pretty good thing for that. The only other candidate that I saw that has an animal welfare, uh, anything policy related to animal welfare on their website is Cory Booker, who happens to be a vegan. And we'll talk about him a little bit later, some of his comments from the town hall. This is not as extensive as Castro's plan, but has some of the same things in it. I'll link this as well for those of you that are interested. Now, neither Cory Booker or Julian Castro are currently polling very high. It's yet to be seen, who's going to drop out of the race, coming up. I'm hopeful that some of the stronger candidates overall will adopt some of these things. Hopefully Bernie Sanders can adopt some of these policies. He appears to be the least corrupted out of all the candidates. And, I think having that, mindset of taking on the big corporations and, not being able to be bought like so many politicians are, that could go a long way for the animal rights movement and tackling climate change. So we'll see what happens, but let's get into into some of these clips here. We're going to start with Kamala Harris. Now, she was asked by a member of the audience if she would change the dietary guidelines for Americans now that we have so much information about how destructive, particularly beef production, is for the environment. So let's see what she said.
I think of the point that you're raising in a broader context, which is that as a nation, we actually have to have a real priority at the highest level of government around what we eat and in terms of healthy eating, because we have a problem in America. And we can talk about all that we are now, the subject of this conversation. We could talk about the amount of sugar in everything. We could talk about soda. We could go on and on.
This has nothing to
So
do
the
with
answer is yes.
sugar or soda,
But I
by
would
the
also
way.
say this:
I don't
the
really know what she's
balance
talking
that we
about
have to
here.
strike here, frankly, is about what government can and should do around creating incentives and then banning certain behaviors. I mean, just to be very honest with you, I love cheeseburgers from time to time, right? I mean, I just do.
Well, that's good to know.
And I think that, but there has to be also what we do in terms of creating incentives that we will eat in a
Rapists like
healthy way,
raping
that we
people,
will
does
eat
that
with
make it okay?
moderation, and that we will be educated
Does that make it
about
acceptable?
the effect of our eating habits on our environment. And we have to do a much better job of that, and the government has to do a much better job of that.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, you love cheeseburgers. I mean, we all do. I don't know whether
from time to
try
time,
the
I don't
Beyond
even have to
Burger,
pay,
the
but
Impossible
yeah.
Burger, right? They try, but
Right.
it's not quite the same. That's my personal opinion.
Why is the host here throwing shade at Impossible and Beyond Burgers? They're not quite the same, in my personal opinion. Okay, well, so backtracking for a minute here. Again, this is the climate crisis town hall. This is what they called it, climate crisis. So we're going to also then allow the defense of eating beef burgers over a Beyond or Impossible Burger because, quote, they're not quite the same. I mean, look at this here. I talked about this in a previous video. This is for the Beyond Burger in comparison to beef burgers. This was a study done by the University of Michigan. And I can link it in the description as well again. I mean, look at what we're talking about here. 99% less water? 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions? I mean, well, they're not quite the same. Like, we have something potentially groundbreaking here. But because you don't think they taste good enough, we're just gonna ignore it and just like chuckle it off. I don't think they're the same. I mean, look at this. 1/4 pound beef burger takes 58 gallons of water and 41 square feet of land. It's frustrating that they're so dismissive and that they get away with it. And nobody challenges them on this. Well, I'm challenging them on this, but you know, I mean, who am I? I'm not, on national TV. So let us get back to this now.
But would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. But people
Yes.
Okay, again, real quick. We haven't used the food pyramid since 2011. My plate is what we use now. My plate since 2011. Gotta get dairy off of there. That's because the dairy lobby. But like, just too misinformed in general for my liking. I mean, if you're gonna like talk about this stuff, you gotta know what you're talking about. We haven't had the food pyramid since 2011. It might sound nitpicky, but just like you gotta be more informed if you're, on this big a stage talking about this stuff. Sorry.
I would. And I'll tell you, I've actually worked on this issue in the past. And it's about, it is about consumer awareness also. And again, maybe this comes from my years of doing the work I did as Attorney General, which is I strongly believe that the American consumer is still left without the information that you need and deserve to have about what it is
It's a
that
fair
you are
point.
putting in your body,
Gotta give
or
her credit where it's
surrounding
due.
yourself with, and the health implications of those things. And so across the board, and with this subject, we have to do a better job. We're going to be taking on powerful interests. But I've always believed that we should expand what's on those cans of those things that you buy in the grocery store. We should expand the list, and included in that should be a measure of the impact on the environment. So you have said,
Awkward, waiting for applause there. I do agree with that last thing. You got to give her credit where it's due. If we put, hey, if we put that information on beef packaging, maybe it will turn some people around. Say, hey, this takes 99% more water to make than Beyond Burger, for example. So interesting. Now we move on to Amy
it's a
Klobuchar.
tragedy what's going on there.
She received a question about the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. It's going on right now. The intentional destruction to be being cleared to raise cattle for beef and dairy. So let's hear what she has to say.
And being part of the International Climate Change Agreement again, being able to have some clout and leverage with our allies will make a big difference in trying to put pressure and working with nonprofits and other groups all over the world to try to stop this, because we're at a point between the fires and some of the decisions for deforestation that it's very, very dangerous to our climate. And I think it just shows how everything is interrelated. There's a reason that we have subsistence farmers in sub-Saharan Africa that are now migrating up as refugees, and this all is one big ecosystem that we have to deal with. So that's the first thing. I am hopeful that we're going to be able to do this in a way, especially when I'm president, that we can continue to have hamburgers and cheese. But at the same time, understand that there are many people that choose to eat vegan, and that is great too. But let me tell you a little bit about a different perspective on our farmers and what we can do.
Eating vegan is not great too.
Because I have seen in rural America,
it's simply the correct and responsible
right now to keep
decision to make.
And my solution here, and we've done
if you're in a situation where you
the only candidate
have the resources to do so, which many people are, quite frankly.
I've done that for over a decade, been through 3 farm bills. And first of all, the conservation programs, and we've done some good things. We have to do more, and that is everything. They're called CRP, CSP, and EQIP. You don't want to know what they stand for, but they're good for conservation. The thing that we're doing
she's like, there's this stuff that you don't want to really know about, but it's good for conservation. She sounds such like a standard politician here. It's just like, I don't think it's coming off very well. Especially in this age that we're in now, with the quote-unquote outsider, and this doesn't excite people. This type of demeanor. You got to come off as more genuine than this. Even Trump, every word that he says is a lie. He at least comes off as being a straight shooter to some people. And same thing with Bernie Sanders. Now, he speaks the truth, generally, but it's all about how you just present yourself. This is not a good look for Amy Klobuchar. I don't even know what the heck she's saying, honestly.
Which is really exciting for climate, is by putting incentives out there for farmers to
incentives
for their land,
I mean, how about
reduce CO2
do better or the world burns?
Things like planting winter cover crops. And it's a pilot
that should be enough of an
right
incentive.
Now, as president, I would expand it greatly. I think we all know planting trees is a really good thing. And no one can make fun of that, because we know the difference that it can make for a minimal amount of money, not just in the U.S., but across the country. And I would do more and more with the tools that we have with our farm bill to work with our farmers, including farming methods that require less water, figuring out how we can do this in a way that's best for the environment, but yet still being able to produce our own food supply. So we are not dependent on other countries that may not have the same environmental standards that we do. Now,
whew, that was a mouthful. Yeah, I don't know. Not really inspired at all by what she said. Planting trees is a good thing, but it's just like, didn't really answer the question, honestly. Like, he was like, what are you going to do about cutting down the Amazon rainforest? And she's like, well, we can just plant more trees. Doesn't really work like that. Nice try, though. I mean, you can't recover the amount of uh, the forest that's being destroyed in the Amazon. You can't recover it. You can't recover the the wildlife diversity and just the sheer amount of plant life that removes carbon from our atmosphere. You can't. Incredibly difficult to replace that. It would take years and years and years. So I don't know. Yeah, yes, planting trees is good, but it's not really like what an offset, so to speak. And not that she suggested that it is, but I just really don't know what she's trying to get at. She didn't say anything really concrete that makes me really feel inspired by her in any way. I wanted to do. I want to go to Elizabeth Warren next. She kind of had a hot soundbite here.
To change our energy consumption and our pollution. And God bless all of those ways. Some of it is with light bulbs, some of it is on straws, some of it, dang, is on cheeseburgers, right?
Dang.
There are a lot of different
Yeah, well, rightfully so.
I get that people are trying to find the part that they can work on and what can they do. And I'm in favor of that, and I'm going to help and I'm going to support. But understand, this is exactly what the fossil fuel industry hopes we're all talking about. That's what they want us to talk about. This is your problem.
She got her soundbite right there.
They want to be able to stir up a lot of controversy around your light bulbs, around your straws, and around your cheeseburger.
Well, I don't really think the fossil fuel industry is stirring up controversy over your cheeseburgers. I think it's just clear as day. Look at this. This is from World Resources Institute. So we have per ton of protein consumed. Land use, freshwater consumption, and greenhouse gas emissions for various foods. So the split here is plant foods on the left, and animal foods on the right. Look at beef. I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, is she suggesting that this is fossil fuel industry propaganda? I mean, I don't know what. Across the board, plant foods are more environmentally friendly. Roots and tubers use slightly more water than eggs, it appears, but less greenhouse gas emission and less land. So, I don't know what else to say there. I mean, and I don't understand the idea that it has to be like one or the other. It's like, well, it's the industry's fault, and consumers shouldn't have to do anything. Well, do you understand supply and demand? I mean, are these companies going to be making all this beef if we're not eating it? And the whole thing about straws, like straws are not a climate change issue. It harms wildlife and sea creatures. So that's the negative effect of that. But it's not, straws are not driving climate change. I mean, that's actually BS. This is not. I'm showing you right here. Cheeseburgers being horrible for climate change is not BS. So, a lot of people, a lot of like progressive news outlets are giving Warren credit for this response. But I think she missed it here. So.
question.
So far, we're mostly not doing too well here. What about Andrew
Beef in
Yang?
particular is a major driver of climate change. Should Americans change their eating habits and eat less beef?
You know, the UN just released a study that said we're going to be okay if the vast majority of the world goes vegetarian immediately. You guys see that? So,
Chuckle from the audience.
it's good for the
Props for
environment
bringing up that
to
study.
You eat less meat. Certainly, meat is an extraordinarily expensive thing to produce from an environmental sustainability point of view.
Just showed
so
that.
I think it would be healthy on both an individual and societal level for us to move in that direction. But again, this is a country where there's a lot of individual autonomy, and so you can't force people's eating choices on them. All you can do is try and shape our system so that over time we evolve in a productive way.
So not a horrible answer by Andrew Yang. Of course, he had to throw in the whole like freedom line, which is kind of like a cheap trick because we can't currently slaughter horses and eat them in the United States, as far as I know. And there's been some kind of back and forth on this in recent years. I was reading that we can export horses to other countries to be slaughtered there and eaten by residents in those countries, but you can't kill and eat a horse here. So, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should lift that ban. What I'm saying is it's inconsistent with what Andrew Yang is saying. Well, you know, you can't tell Americans what to eat. Well, we tell them that they can't eat horses. You can't eat cats and dogs. You can't eat other people, right? I mean, so we already do that to some extent. But definitely props for bringing up the UN study. You know, the UN study that Trevor Noah thought was just a big joke and just a chance for him to get in some cheap laughs at the expense of vegans. All right, let's go to Pete Buttigieg now.
Something about the anxiety of the consumer and the citizen. One of the things that we keep being told by science is, this cattle issue is a real situation. And as he was pointing out, it really is about supply and demand. If you don't want the beef, they don't raise the cattle the same way. But that's a big ask in American culture. So what do you say to the Americans that you want to persuade who maybe aren't that left? Maybe they're in the center or center right, and they're saying, you want me to eat less beef?
Look, first of all, I'm from Indiana, and secondly, I love cheeseburgers. So I get
he loves cheeseburgers. Hey, Kamala Harris called.
The important thing to
She wants her
understand and get
cop
across
out
is that
line back.
we can have a more balanced diet, and therefore a more balanced footprint, and not propose that they abolish the cow, which is what a lot of people are saying about the Green New Deal. Not because that's what it actually envisions, but because it's an easy Republican talking point. Of course we need balance in all of our consumption patterns. And part of what a carbon tax and dividend does is it resets the price signals in the market to help make that happen without ordering Americans to abandon something that is very important to them. Instead, we change the economic signals, we bring it into balance. And balance is what we have lost when it comes to our relationship with creation, with the earth that sustains our ability to live.
Okay, he's getting all like philosophical on us there. Balance is something that we've lost. Look, I understand that you can't get up there as a presidential candidate and say, everybody's got to go vegan now. It's political suicide, unfortunately. But it really seems like they're tap dancing around this issue here, man. It's like, at what point does personal freedom have to kind of take a back seat to the grander picture? I'll say it again. This is the climate crisis town hall. So when you say, I love cheeseburgers, I mean, frickin' Calvin loves driving his gas guzzling pickup truck. People love doing things that are harmful. Does that mean that they're justified in doing them? And really, if you ask me, playing the personal freedom card in regards to eating meat, it's kind of it shouldn't apply because there's a victim involved when you eat animal products. There's a victim involved. I don't have the freedom to punch somebody in the face. Not that I would want to do that anyway, but I don't have the freedom to do that. My freedom ends where someone else's begins, essentially. So, not a fan of that answer by Pete Buttigieg. But it gets worse with Beto O'Rourke.
It takes 20 times the land and creates 20 times the carbon pollution as 1 pound of plant protein.
Spelling it out right here.
As president, how do you think the American diet should change, agriculture should change, and to all those carnivores in your state, can they have their steak and eat it too?
Yeah.
Drones, yeah, I knew that one was going to die.
Thanks for asking the question. The answer is yes, but
the answer is yes.
You
can have your steak and eat it too.
What we consume, how we live, is all going to have to reflect the true cost of carbon and climate change and pollution. And I'm confident that those ranchers in Texas, whom I've visited with, and my wife grew up on a cattle ranch in New Mexico, they're going to be able to meet the targets that we set. I believe in the ingenuity of the American rancher and the American farmer.
This is a common talking point just about every aspect of getting toward so-called green technology, right? I believe in the ingenuity of I believe science, and I believe that we can use technology to get to our emission standards, which is fine in most sectors per se. You could say that you want to get off fossil fuels, go to 100% renewable energy. You could ditch combustion engines and transportation vessels. What are you going to do with animals? They're not machines. How are you going to make an animal? How are you going to make a cow that doesn't fart out methane? How are you going to make a cow that doesn't produce toxic excrement? How are you going to make a cow that doesn't require massive amounts of food that's grown on deforested land? I mean, we didn't cover this clip, but Buttigieg mentioned something earlier about a net zero carbon, or a carbon neutral, I guess you could say, dairy farm. But no specifics on how we get there. I mean, it just absolutely makes no sense. Yep.
I believe that we can be up to these challenges, and I reject any notion that we have to radically or fundamentally change how we eat or what we eat. I think we just have to be more responsible in the way that we do it, and the best way to do that is to allow the market to respond by setting a price on carbon.
We got to allow the market to respond. So as soon as meat comes into the picture, all the Democrats become Republicans. That's basically what we're seeing. Now the market has to be the deciding factor.
Every single part of our economy, every facet of American life.
Yeah. He's got one lady across, and she's wearing the Cow Pots t-shirt, sitting right in front.
Go dairy farmers. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, go dairy farmers. Yeah, like me, because I like dairy farmers. Dude, really? Washington Post. The best way to help dairy farmers is to get them out of dairy farming. This is a very interesting piece. I'll link this in the description as well. But it talks about how we're trending away from dairy. I've seen stories about dairy farmers that have moved to plant-based milks or moved to just farming plants, produce. I mean, we're artificially propping up these dairy farms. It talks about the subsidies, government subsidies, there's the dairy lobby. It's an interesting piece, so I'll link that in the description as well. Yeah, like, go dairy farmers. It's just, That's again so politician-y. Like, let me try and sound hip and cool, and like I'm with the times, and I see right through it. See right through it. All right, almost done here. Let's get to Bernie Sanders. This is a quick
We are
clip.
saying that we're going to end factory farming because that is not only, that is a danger to the environment and to climate change. And, there will be a
Got
transition.
applause
There will
for
be a
saying
transition,
end
and
factory
there will be some
farming.
pain there. We're going to put money into protecting family-based agriculture, where people can, instead of having products, food products, transported all over the world or all over the country, you can get that food as much as we can, get it locally. So there's going to be change, and we're going to have to ask people to understand that we have got to make those changes now, even though they may be a little bit uncomfortable.
Brilliant by Bernie Sanders. So refreshing to finally hear somebody say, yeah, we're going to have to make changes that may be uncomfortable, but we're doing it for the greater good. He's not going to stand up there and say, well, Americans love their cheeseburgers and their cheese and their milk. No fluff. Tell it like it is. Now, Bernie Sanders is not a vegan. Some vegans are. There's kind of a debate going on. Like, well, do you vote for Cory Booker because he's a vegan, or do you vote for Bernie Sanders because he's uncorrupted and his values seem to fall more in line with vegan values? Does it matter so much that one person is a vegan, or how much change could they potentially make to the greater good? And I do support Senator Sanders at the moment. I do think he'll probably end up being one of the final three candidates. Seems like it's going to be Biden, Warren, and Sanders. We'll see what happens. But I was happy to hear this. Now, banning factory farming would be huge. That's going to require that we drastically reduce our consumption of animal products, because we just simply cannot have family farmers producing enough. That's the whole reason why we shifted towards factory farms. It was necessitated. It was necessitated by the demand, and the desire to just simply make as much profit quickly as possible. So last up is Cory Booker. He spoke a lot about this. Now, he is a vegan, as I've said before. I thought he gave generally a really good answer here.
Yeah, and I want to quote you. Let me get it right. You said that you don't want to preach to anybody about their diet. So my question is, your administration wouldn't have any programs to encourage healthy diets that would also combat climate change?
Oh my gosh. So let's go right at this, because I hear it all the time. Booker wants to take away your hamburger. That is the kind of lie.
Well, are you going to do it? Says Don Lemon.
Out there that
you're going to take away our hamburgers?
Want to get rid of hamburgers. Look, I am a vegan. I take my diet very seriously. I actually became a vegetarian when I was still a college football player, coming out of playing college football. But this is the point. We live in a society right now, going back to the corporate consolidation that we're seeing, where the farming practices are becoming so perverse. I've been to a place called Duplin, North Carolina. My dad is from the state, and
He gets pretty deep here, and I really appreciate where he takes us.
Massive factory farms, where the farmers themselves are living like sharecroppers, deeply in debt. Their lives now are they're not making great money. These large companies like Smithfield now, international companies, I think Chinese owned at this point, are doing practices where they have treatment of farm animals in ways that is contrary to what I see farmers in Iowa. They put them in these massive they don't want people to see what's going on, so they cover them. All that pig refuse.
And the ag-gag rules that I talked about earlier protects
them. Spray it over fields. And I went there and I stood there in a black community. I watched how the stuff fell on the fields but misted into the black community. I sat in a room packed with activists who said, we can't open our windows.
We can't put our clothing on the line. We can't run our air conditioning. We have respiratory diseases, asthma. Our creeks, because when storms come through, they pull that stuff out and pollute creeks and rivers. There's not a person in our country seeing that misery that wants to take a part in that. But yet we have, thanks to the corporate lobby of these big companies, we're incentivizing those kind of farm practices and not the kind that represent our heritage and support independent family farmers. And so this is something, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be a president that's giving tax
Don't
breaks
apologize.
to people who are polluting folks, causing cancers, destroying our environment as well. And so let me tell you where we've got to go as a country. Freedom is one of the most sacred values. Whatever you want to eat, go ahead and eat it. But when I come to you right now from the only person
Yeah, and he kind of has to say that,
entire campaign, the only
you
person in
know,
the Senate that lives in an inner city, black and brown,
or he
low
feels
income
like he has to
community.
say that.
You know what we're
Similar to what
furious
Andrew
about in
Yang
my
said,
community?
so my
Communities all
comments
across this country is
are
that
the
we don't
same.
have access to fresh and healthy foods. We live in food deserts.
That's a great
There's
point.
a guy. You would love this guy, and you should interview him.
He's tying
He's
this all
one of the
together
best TikTokers
much
listening.
better
He's got
than
a raw
Kamala
food.
Harris
They
attempted
call him
to,
Gorilla Gardener.
quite frankly.
Yes, you should. He has this saying about South Central. He says, in South Central, we have drive-bys and drive-throughs. And more people are getting killed by the drive-throughs than the drive-bys. We live in a country right now, and we've battled this when I was mayor. We got our first supermarkets built in decades. We turned entire city blocks into urban gardens, gave guys coming home, men and women coming home from prison, jobs on the farms, that helped with our heat island that we had, all helping our environment, but giving access to fresh and healthy foods. Because I'm sorry, corporations like McDonald's, who oppress their workers, do not pay living wages, and are the only option in communities, feeding things to folks that are making them ill. That is not a healthy food system. If I am your president, all of these issues, already in the first 10 minutes, we've talked about corporate corruption, campaign finance, agriculture, environmental justice. All of these things are interrelated. You can't separate them out. And so I'm going to be the president that says, when we talk about healthcare, let's not just talk about doctors and nurses. Let's talk about healthy food systems and the toxins that are in our communities. And so I will always be about the freedom to eat what you want. But we are going to have to make sure our government is not subsidizing the things that make us sick and unhealthy and hurt our environment, and start to incentivize the practices that get farming and get agriculture and get the health of our communities back. We need to especially be looking at communities that are low income and vulnerable, and investing in those communities so that they can have health and well-being as well.
Wow, so, alright, this video is getting very long. If you've made it this far, thanks for hanging in there with me. I won't say too much more about this, but I really, as a whole, love that answer. It came off as authentic, and I feel that, you know, as a vegan, he kind of, like I've been saying in some other videos, you gotta kind of like tiptoe around, make sure you don't say anything that pisses people off. I think he did a very good job in generally conveying sort of, you know, the kind of message that is true to the vegan values, but also, you know, can be appreciated by non-vegans. And what I was saying earlier about Amy Klobuchar not being inspiring, like this is inspiring stuff here for me. So again, you know, hopefully somebody like Bernie can, you know, adopt sort of this sort of perspective. Not sure how far Booker's going to get into the race. You know, yet to be seen. So in general, I ended on a high note here with Sanders and Booker, but most of the responses, you know, I didn't love. As a vegan, I feel that they downplayed the role of animal agriculture and, you know, sort of tried to say that people don't have, you know, to change anything, even though we're in a climate crisis. Climate crisis, but don't change a thing. And I'm here to say no. We can do this. You know, you know, no one person can make a difference, said millions of people. But you the reality is that we can. So we need a powerful leader that's going to implement some changes, but also at a grassroots level. So the time to go vegan is now.